الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن يعمل من الصالحات من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فأولئك يدخلون الجنة ولا يظلمون نقيرا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali. Again, as we have in the previous nights, before we begin our topic of discussion, one of the thawabit jariyah, meaning continuous rewards that exist in this world, is to having a pious and upright child who prays for you after you've left this world. It's one of the things that promotes us to have family and to have children and to have relations in our families and connect with communities. It's one of the things that Rasulullah loved. تَنَاكَهُ تَنَاسَلُوا تَكْثُرُوا فَإِنِّي أُبَاهِي بِكُمَ الْأُمَمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَوْ بِالسَّقْطِ. Our Prophet would say, go out, connect, have families grow, and I will intercede for you on the Day of Judgment, even if it is by the stillborn child, that your lineage doesn't continue, but that you followed the instruction I gave you, I will intercede for you. But it's not just enough that we have children. There is the tarbiyah, there is the upbringing of children, there is the training of children. One of the benefits that if we choose to seek in our akhirah, in our hereafter, is that this child is our thawab jari and an assistant to us. We have to train them correctly in this world. You have to spend time and invest with the thought process that I am raising the next generation of Muslim. I need to teach them how to live the values of Islam. It's not enough I made my child an engineer, I made my child a doctor, I made my child a lawyer. But if at the cost of making him that lawyer, that doctor, that engineer, he's no longer a Muslim, what's the benefit? What did I achieve? I gained nothing by this effort. Which is why in this time, as you raise and we raise our children, it's significant, important, priceless to make sure that my son, my daughter, I don't care if you're a janitor, I don't care if you're a president, but never forget that you are a Muslim first. And part of that is training them now, that these Thursday nights are not normal nights. For a mu'min, for a believer, Allah has given us instruction that these Thursday nights, like the day of Friday, are not like normal days and times, but rather in this night, the malaika come to the lowest of heavens and call out to the people that if you have a hajjah, if you have a desire, tonight is the night to ask and Allah will fulfill it for you. When we look in the Quran, we see that Yaqub's sons, who had abused Yusuf and harmed him, when they came to seek the forgiveness, they came to their father and they said to their father, "O Nabi Allah, seek forgiveness for us that we were unjust with our brother Yusuf." Allah specifies that Yaqub says, "I will soon ask forgiveness for you." When they asked, why did Yaqub not immediately ask forgiveness of his sons and said, "I will soon ask forgiveness for you"? In the tafsir, we have the riwayah of the Imam that explains and says that Yaqub was waiting for Thursday night to come, that then he would seek forgiveness because he knew that this was a pious time in which to seek forgiveness from Allah and get it answered. So these Thursday nights, you have to train your children that it's not about watching TV or movies or going out with your friends, but that these are a time of ibadat. And when you sit together on Thursday nights, make it a practice. Teach them to pray for the marhumeen and the previous generations that have come. If you don't do it with them, they won't do it for you. If you want to ensure that your lineage is pious, enact with them. Make Thursday night different. Recite Dua Kumail together. Our 8th Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Radha alayhi salam. In the ta'arif of this Dua Kumail, he says, I invite and insist that every mu'min at least recite this dua every night. If you can't recite it every night, recite it once a week. If you can't recite it once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, once a year. And then he would conclude and say, Oh mu'mineen, ensure that this Dua Kumail you have recited at least once in your life. If you want your child to recite this dua, he has to do it with you. She has to do it with you. This is the time to make and invest in that thawab jariyah. That my child is that continuous reward that when I die and my book is closed, I can no longer do good for myself. I can no longer seek istighfar from Allah. If I train this child now, then even when I'm not here, they will follow the good teachings I have established in their character, and they will assist me when I can't even assist myself. May Allah give us all upright and pious children. Our topic of discussion has been the connection between our 3rd Imam and our final Imam. We've mentioned the concept of how the Imam will be recognized by the concept of justice. We have discussed and recognized that the cause and the purpose of the Imam will be the hidayah of humanity. There's a question that is sometimes raised in this discussion because of the look into history, especially looking at the cause of Imam Hussain, that sometimes they question and they say, why were there not women in the battle? Why were women not given the same role? And what is the role of the women in these campaigns of both the Imam of Karbala and the Imam of our time, Sahibul Asr wa Zaman, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. It's important to understand that men and women in Islam have different roles, but there is equity between them. There is a difference in the perspective of Islam that Islam does not teach equality, it teaches equity. Equality creates the implication that everyone should do the same thing and everyone should have the same thing. Equity is to say that there is the potential and the ability to reach the same high status, though it may be through different paths. When we look at, for example, an honorable and dignified profession, there is a tradition that says of the major honorable and dignified professions, you can say there is a doctor, there is a lawyer, there is an engineer. You would say that these professions are all dignified and honorable, but the lawyer cannot do what the doctor does, and the doctor cannot do what the engineer does. Each has a different process by which, but they all attain a dignity and status because of the work that they do and the service that they offer. Not unlike this in Islam, Allah has indicated the balance of equity between the genders, though the roles and responsibilities between the two are different. For example, in the verses of Quran, the verse that we began our discussion with in Surah An-Nisa, verse number 124, Allah says, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى. Whoever it is that performs good deeds, whether they be male or female, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, and they are a believer and keep faith, فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلِمُونَ نَقِيرًا. That those, whether they be male or female, as long as they have iman, they will be entered into heaven, and they will not be dealt with even an iota of injustice. This verse within itself tells us of the responsibility of equity, that the result and the consequence of iman will bring, whether you are male or female, to the entrance of heaven, as long as iman is present and good deeds are done. We look at other verses within the Quran as well too. For example, in Surah Al-Hujurat, verse number 13, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum sha'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Ahsantum. Surah Hujurat, verse number 13, gives the explanation and the description that says, O mankind, we have created you from men and women and made you into tribes and clans, lita'arafu, so that you may know each other. These lineages, these genders are a process of creating identity within society, not as a rate of superiority. Many times this verse is quoted when the discussion becomes, for example, from Arab, non-Arab, Sadat, non-Sadat, or it comes, for example, in the aspect of someone who has converted to Islam and someone who has been in Islam for many years. These superiorities mean nothing in the eyes of Allah. Rather, that these are a process by which humanity is identified. Similarly, Allah mentions that خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى. We made you from men and women. But this does not differentiate or reduce the status of one or another. Rather, we see inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That amongst all of these differentiations that can exist within you in society, whether it be on the basis of gender, whether it be on the basis of clan, whether on the basis of nationality, none of this means anything to Allah. The only superiority one person has over another is their piety. That one who enacts piety attains superiority in the eyes of Allah. Without that piety, your nationality, your gender means nothing in the face of Allah. There's no superiority to this. Understanding all of this, there are some differences. For example, we take a look and we see when it comes to the laws of inheritance, Allah makes a statement in the Quran, وَلِلذَّكَرِ مَثْلِ الْحَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. That for a male will be the equivalent of every share of two women. That in inheritance we see that Allah has given more to the man than to the woman. We take a look and we see, for example, when it comes to the process of giving witness, that for one male witness there are two female witnesses. When we see discrepancies like this, people look to see and say that this is the establishment of the rule and that Islam has created differentiation between the two. But when we compare these verses to the verses we began our discussion with, we find that the first verse gives itlaq, meaning its general application, and the second gives its exception to say that there is equity between the two of them, but there are some differences that Allah has elaborated when it comes to the example of witness, for example, and the example of inheritance. When we see exceptions like this, we have to understand that these are the exceptions to the rule, not the fundamental of the rule. And that Allah has in instances created differences, but those differences do not indicate superiority. Just because something is different doesn't mean it's better. Shall I give you an example? You guys awake? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. A shaheed in the religion of Islam is treated differently. Someone who dies a shaheed, there is no ghusl for them, there is no kafan for them. They are buried in that same condition in the ground. And we say that this is one of the exceptional rights of the shaheed. But just because a shaheed receives this right, it doesn't automatically mean they're superior than a mu'min in another condition. It doesn't. The uncle of the Holy Prophet, Hazrat Hamza, who was known as Sayyid al-Shuhada in his time, was a shaheed. There was no ghusl for him. There was no kaf Uhud. He was buried immediately. But that honor and that dignity that he received is an honor and dignity that he deserved. But it does not mean that he possessed the superiority to a mu'min in another condition. For example, our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Nabi al-A'zam, the greatest of the Anbiya, received ghusl, received kafan, died in his house, not on the battlefield. He had to be given ghusl and kafan. Hazrat Hamza did not. Does that mean that that exception or that rule that was applied to Hazrat Hamza makes him greater than Rasulullah? No. The honor that Hazrat Hamza possesses is because of the dignity of Rasulullah. The status of Rasulullah and the proximity that Hamza possessed to Rasulullah gave him that status of being Sayyid al-Shuhada. Meaning that different applications of these rules, different applications of what rule applies to an individual, is the responsibility and the application of how Allah has dictated and mandated to keep within society structure. And Allah has created these differentiations, not on the basis of superiority, but on the basis of responsibility, that whoever fits whichever criteria submits to the will of Allah and performs the action as it was dictated. So when we see, for example, that there are differences, whether in the concept of witness, whether in the concept of, for example, inheritance, it is not on the basis that one is superior and the other is lower, but no, rather the ahkam that Allah has established are for the fundamental of keeping society operating, and this is one of the tools of keeping society to operate. At times we can understand the hikmah of Allah's command, and at times we have to submit to Allah's command as He has dictated it. Shall I give you an example? Are we okay, or shall I give you an example? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When it comes to the example of inheritance, sometimes we can discover some hikmah in this. That's when we say, for example, for the daughter is 1 share and for the son is 2 shares. We can describe and explain a hikmah. That the daughter has no liability. That there is no one who that she has to provide to except for herself. For example, the income of a lady or the inheritance that a lady receives, no one else has a share of it, no one else do they have a liability to pay out from that. But for the male who may receive an inheritance, he has the liability of his spouse, the liability of his children, the liability of his parents if they should remain alive at that time. All of these people, whatever the son receives, they all have a haqq on him that has to be provided for. When Allah gives that double share to the son, He also puts a larger number of liabilities and responsibilities on him. But when it comes to the daughter, whatever share she receives, not her husband, not her children, no one has a right on it. Only her has the right to decide what she does with it. This may be an example of understanding the hikmah, and sometimes we can say, I understand the hikmah of this hukum, and I understand the hikmah and the wisdom behind this law. But don't expect that every law will have a wisdom that you and I can understand. If we were to sit here and debate, that's why is Fajr 2? In Fajr, it is a time of quietness and peace. Wouldn't it be better to dedicate more of my time for the service of Allah when no one is bothering me and it's just me communicating with my Lord? But Allah dictated 2, not more. If you were to say, Dhuhr, I am busy with work, I leave the dunya and I come to Allah, couldn't Allah be kind to me and make it 2 instead of 4? You may not understand the hikmah, but the responsibility is submit to the command that the one who has established the law has more knowledge than I do. One of the most fundamental responsibilities of every mu'min and Muslim is this taslim and submission to the command of Allah. What happens many times, we look at the command of Allah and we imagine I should understand what Allah meant by this. Baba, what is your intellect in comparison to the intellect of the Khaliq? If those a'imma submitted to the will of Allah, if those noble personalities submitted to the will of Allah and did not question Him, what gives me the right to turn around to Allah and ask Him why? My goal is to understand what Allah has commanded, not why Allah has commanded. So when we see these differences, and people try to stress the difference, and they say that one is afdal to the other, they are liars. Because if they were truthful, that means that the Quran would not be telling the truth, that Allah has created everyone with equity. Our responsibility is first and foremost to understand that the command of Allah is absolute and correct in its execution. And that the command of Allah has not prevented anyone from coming to the service of Islam. Which is why that women, like men, played a fundamental role in the success of the campaign of Imam Hussain in Karbala, and both men and women will play an essential role in the success of the campaign of the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. When we look at the role of women, and we'll elaborate these, the role of women in the campaign of Imam Hussain, to understand the success of the campaign of Imam Hussain by the support of the women, the first place that you look is the campaign, the difference between what Muslim ibn Aqil did in Kufa and what Imam Hussain accomplished in Karbala. The difference in the support, Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil in Kufa, 18,000 men stood behind him. And in Karbala, only 80 men stood behind Imam Hussain. 80 or less. But where Muslim ibn Aqil winds up alone in Kufa, and where those in Karbala refuse to leave the Imam, one of the fundamental differences is the support of the women. When Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil gathers these 18,000 men and stands in front of Dar al-Imara, the governor's palace in the city of Kufa, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad has very, very few followers with him. And 18,000 men could have easily destroyed Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and ended the campaign of the Banu Umayyah right in that moment. But Ubaidullah was a clever man. He knew that in military, I don't have enough support to beat 18,000 men. So what does he do? He takes the few policemen that he has, he takes the few supporters that he has. He says, I want each of you to take a flag and go out to each of the mahalla in the city of Kufa. Go out to each of the neighborhoods in which the supporters of Muslim ibn Aqil live. I want you to plant this flag, he would tell them, and I want you to call out that the Amir, na'uzubillah, in Sham has sent an army. That the Khalifa in Sham has sent an army. And that army is coming to destroy anyone who has rebelled against this authority in the city of Kufa. If you wish to seek sanctuary, then you must seek the flag that we are planting now and come back to your houses. Otherwise, if you stand against the Khalifa and his army, then your blood, your family, your property, all will be taken away by the Khalifa. Not one of the soldiers that was present with Muslim ibn Aqil heard this call. Who heard the call? The women of the household. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad went to the women and frightened them. When the women became frightened, they came one by one to the company of Muslim ibn Aqil and collected their men and said, Muslim has 18,000 men. Why do you endanger our future? Who will take care of us if anything happens to you? Come home. And slowly the men began to leave. That, yeah, I guess Muslim ibn Aqil has 18,000, 17,000. Until eventually the number became 9,000, 8,000. Now the women came and they said, Muslim has only 8,000. Why do you kill yourself? You will definitely die, and what will happen to us after you are gone? And in this way, they took that support of 18,000 in the span of an evening and turned it into nothing. And on the other side, look in the field of Karbala, and you will find that the role of women was one of the most critical roles. That they were the ones who supported these men, these boys, these children to go out and fight for the sake of the Imam. In one narration of the companions of Imam Hussain, it's narrated that a young boy came and said, Yabna Rasulullah, give me permission. Imam refused him, said, go back. The boy comes to his mother, he says, oh Amma, he won't let me fight. The mother says that maybe it is because you don't have armor. Take your father's armor and put it on and then go see if he will let you fight. The boy comes in the armor and says, Yabna Rasulullah, give me permission. The Imam says, I don't give you permission. The boy again goes back to his mother and complains, Mother, he won't let me fight. She says, maybe because it looks like it's not your armor. Let's fix this armor so it looks as if you are prepared, you are ready for battle. So she helps him tighten the armor, wear it properly, make it look like a proper soldier would. Again, the boy proceeds and he stands before Imam Hussain and he says, Yabna Rasulullah, give me permission to sacrifice for your sake. Imam Hussain turns and he says, my dear son, I am not preventing you for any lack of love that I have for you, but rather I see that your father was killed in the first volley of arrows that was launched. And for your mother to lose a husband and a son in one day would be too much. Go back and take care of your mother. That mother comes upon hearing this and she says, oh son of Zahra, why do you want me to be embarrassed in front of your mother that she sacrifices her children and my children should remain alive today? I am the one who is sending this boy to fight for you. I am the one who wants to stand before your mother with honor. That was the difference of the role of the women in Karbala versus the role of the women in Kufa. That the women in Kufa became afraid for their dunya. That who will take care of us, who will provide? And the women in Karbala understood the impact of akhirah and wanted to ensure that they could stand with dignity on the day of judgment before Ali Muhammad. Ya Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This was not the extent of the role of women in Karbala. Rather, the success of the message of Abu Abdullah rests in the hands of the women. Think of the simple logistics of what happens in Karbala. An army of thousands faces off against 100 men in the middle of a desert without any social media. There is no question of Twitter or Instagram. How does that message survive till today? It survives because of those women who were taken as prisoners and raised their voice to expose the evil actions of the Banu Umayyah. It is existing today because of the efforts of the women to go out and to speak about and to show the depravity of who was killed and why in the field of Karbala. One of the important messages of the event of Karbala is how we raise our children. We may say that we understand the importance of raising our sons because they are the warriors who fought. But don't neglect that if you don't train your women to stand up, your daughters to stand up for haqq, to recognize haqq, to be able to support haqq, to have the intellect to speak about what is right and what is just, to stand up for Islam when no one raises their hand, then where would Sayyidah Zainab come from? Where would the daughters of the Ahlul Bayt come from? Is the efforts of Amir al-Mu'mineen that we saw in the tongue of Sayyidah Zainab when she stood up for the cause of Abu Abdullah, where they would say in the city of Kufa, it is as if I hear the voice of Ali ibn Abi Talib coming from this caravan that has come. These prisoners give us the explanation and the words that we once heard from our master Amir al-Mu'mineen. These roles of men and women are not separated in the event of Karbala. Rather, that the raising of upright children, both boys and girls, is a significant element that ensures that the message of Islam persists. There is no more importance of one than the other, but rather that each role was unique that had to be fulfilled to ensure that the message of Karbala persists. Our Holy Prophet, we're going to go on a tangent. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our Prophet, when people would come to him, there are many things our Prophet would do. Part of it was teaching the importance and the value of children. In a famous narration, a man comes with 2 children and he comes and he sits by Rasulullah and he sits one on his lap next to him and the other one away from him. And he treats one very specially, very kindly, and the other one doesn't pay attention to. There are 2 sets of narration. One that simply says that one was treated better, the other wasn't. The other narration specifies and says that the first one that was treated special was the son, and the other one was the daughter. And Rasulullah asks, why do you not treat them equitably? Why do you not treat them fairly between the 2 of them? And the man replies, he says, Ya Rasulullah, this one will be my inheritor, this one will save my businesses, this one will take care of me when I'm old. What will she do? And Rasulullah replies and he says, this is the wrong way of thinking, that treat them both with equity, treat them both with fairness, love both of them the same. If you love one this way, the other one deserves the same right. Rasulullah is teaching, don't look at the maddiyat. This man who is thinking of what material means, he is doing injustice between his children. But the one who recognizes and understands that both of these are the thawab jariyah, these are qari khair that will continue on after him, both deserve that love. Both serve Islam. Both were created by Allah, and Allah is the one who designated one or the other. This teaches us that there is equity between them. There is fair treatment between them. That is what the religion of Islam teaches. Which is why there is a significant role of women in the government of our 12th Imam, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif. When you want to look at and understand, when you see our Imam, there is one mistake that people make. And I'll explain this mistake very quickly. They say that the companions of the Imam will be how many? If you're awake, you should know this, huh? How many? 313. And some people come to the argument and say that if there were 313 of these true companions today, the Imam would come today. the Imam's support is more than 313. The Imam needs more than 313. He needs all of us. The description of the 313 that is given to us, that describes and says that the way our Prophet in the Battle of Badr had 313 soldiers to support him, so will the Imam have 313 to support him. These 313 are not the only supporters of the Imam. These are the generals, these are the judges, these are the advisors, the companions, the close leaders who will lead the movement of the Imam in the world. The Imam needs all of us. But the elite from amongst them will be those 313 that will gather with the Imam when he makes his annunciation. One of the most important signs of the coming of the Imam is that he begins his mission on the day of Ashura. He continues that message and that mission that was began by Imam Hussain and starts that campaign, and those 313 generals and leaders join him in that position. One of the important things that our fifth Imam, Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhi salam, pointed out, and he says, of these 313 of the elite, 50 of them will be women, who will be amongst the leaders of the movement of the Imam, which shows that the significance of women in the movement of Imam Zaman is not insignificant, but that even amongst the elite there is a role that the women will play in managing this entire process, and that they have a responsibility to the Imam and a service to the Imam. But this isn't the only aspect that 50 women will be. At least 50 women will be from amongst the 313. No, in the same way that the call of our third Imam needed the support of the mothers, the sisters, the wives, the same is true of the call of the 12th Imam. When our Imam comes, inshallah, when our Imam comes, ahsantum, when that call is heard, it will be a call to action for the Imam. That now is the time to mobilize immediately. There are descriptions that say that when you hear the sound of the Imam, the strength of each mu'min who has believed in Imam will be multiplied threefold in support of the Imam. That their heart will be strengthened in the love of the Imam, and they will be ready to move. But until that moment comes, each of us has families, obligations, responsibilities. And there are some who, when they hear that call, they will think, who's going to take care of my wife? Who's going to raise my infant son? Who's going to pay my mortgage? I'm working on a very big deadline. Once I finish my work, then inshallah I can come to Imam. Let me just finish the work. There will be people who will be overcome by the material world, and they will say that, how will I take care of my family? And there will be families who will say, where are you going? Who is going to take care of us? The same way that the cause of Imam Hussain in Karbala needed the support, that if one goes to fight, the other stands in support and gives them the confidence to go. The same will be true in that time of our 12th Imam. Are we training our families that everything is good, but when Islam is needed, when Islam calls me, I drop everything to go? That training is established from the household. And the leader of that household who establishes that is our mothers, to teach us, oh my son, your family, oh my husband, oh my father, I'll be okay. If the Imam has called you to an action, prefer that action over anything else. When we talk about this intidar is talking about these things. That if the Imam calls me, what would I do? If Islam needs me, are we ready? Are we confident that we can make the sacrifice for the sake of the Imam? When we see the connection between Abu Abdullah and Imam Zaman, it is to learn the lesson of who was righteous on that day and prepare in the same fashion so that when his grandson, his son calls to us, we are ready. These tears that we cry It's to prepare and to remember what is the priority. These examples we have to implement when we see the connection. Do not undermine and say that the role is for one, not the other, or that one was present, the other was absent. No, the success of the fact that we talk about Karbala is that every person fulfill their obligation and responsibility in the best of manners. So if you want to learn how to support Imam Zaman, look at the school of Karbala. Look at the school of Ahlul Bayt and understand, how do we prepare for this? Those companions, some came readily, and others, it took work for them to be there. Think of the example of Zuhair ibn Qayn. Zuhair, who had stood against Imam Ali. Zuhair, who when he saw the encampments of Imam Hussain, separated himself and went far away. Until eventually, when he talks to Imam Hussain, he goes back to his wife and he says, I divorce you today. I'm going with Imam Hussain, and that is to my shahadat, that I leave you to your own affair. This action, his wife calls out and she says, oh Zuhair, when I counseled you to go see Imam Hussain, then I was good enough to be your wife. Now you are attaining success and you want to leave me. There were others like Habib. Habib, who is the Sheikh of the Ashab, who is the leader of the Ashab, who was an old man, but he loved Imam Hussain. Habib is maybe 20 years in some narrations older than Abu Abdullah. The descriptions write and say that Habib had a special place in the relationship with Imam Hussain, that when his father Mazahir would walk with Rasulullah and Imam Hussain would be playing behind him, Habib as a grown man would walk behind Imam Hussain. In one instance they describe that Rasulullah stops talking to the father, turns back and kisses the son. Mazahir says, Ya Rasulullah, what did my child do? What did my Habib do? Rasulullah explains and he says, oh Mazahir, we the Anbiya see behind us the same way we see in front of us. This Habib of yours has a love for my Hussain. That is something special. He says, what did he do? He says, oh Mazahir, I saw your Habib walking behind my Hussain, and he would lift the dust from behind under the feet of Hussain and would kiss that dust to his eyes. I love this Habib for the way that he loves my Hussain. Which is why when Abu Abdullah found himself with a small troop in the field of Karbala, and the army of the enemy kept increasing, the comment was made, Ya ibn Rasulullah, have you no friends to call that would come to your support? And Abu Abdullah says, I have called this one friend of mine. They describe and say that one night Habib is sitting to dinner with his wife. A messenger knocks on the door. It's an odd time to receive a messenger, but Habib gets up and receives the messenger. He comes back, his wife asks him, Bashir, inshallah khair. What happened? Who was it? He says, I have received a message from my friend Hussain ibn Ali from Abu Abdullah. She says, what has he said? Habib replies and he says, Hussain ibn Ali has mentioned he is in a state of difficulty, that he is surrounded by enemies, and he has called to me to come to his assistance. The wife of Habib asks, what do you intend? He says, I don't know. I have you and our son at home. Our child is young. You are alone. If I leave you, what will happen to you? Famously, the poets write and explain this exchange. They say that the wife of Habib says, oh Habib, you stay here, I will go to Hussain. If you are worried about this, then this is your affair. My affair is with my Imam. Habib explains in the poetry, they write and they say that he explains to his wife, be patient, I wanted to make sure that my lineage would follow the path of Islam. Now that I am sure I am ready to leave. They describe and say that Habib, the city had a curfew on it that no one could leave. So Habib went to his servant and said, oh my servant, take the horse out beyond the city as if you are taking it to graze. And after the middle of the night, I will come meet you. Habib took some time exiting the city to leave the curfew and not to be caught by the soldiers of Ubaydullah. The descriptions write and say that when Habib reaches his horse, he can hear, because it's in the middle of the desert, that his servant is saying, "O horse of Habib, be patient in going to the help of Hussain. If my master cannot come, I will take you to the Nusrat of Abu Abdullah. I will take you to the help of Hussain." Habib imagines how difficult the time on Hussain ibn Ali, that the servants of my house are asking to offer him assistance. Habib takes his horse and he says, "I set you free." The servant calls out and he says, "Oh master, you kept me with you. Now when you go to victory, you leave me." So Habib takes him as well to the help of Abu Abdullah. The companions of Imam Hussain were those who fought unlike anything else. After the battle of Karbala, a critic came to the general of the army of Umar Asad and said to Umar Asad, "Oh Umar Asad, why did you have to kill all of these men? They were the pious men of our community. Burair, Muslim ibn Awsaja. These were the leaders of the communities of Kufa." They said, "Umar Asad, why did you have to kill them? Could you not have imprisoned them?" Umar Asad replies, he says, "Put stones in your mouth to silence you. You don't understand, these men were like lions looking and hunting us, that there was no way to stop them except that we would kill them." That these helpers of Imam Hussain had made the pact amongst themselves that we shall give everything that we possess for the sake of Abu Abdullah. There are two moments on the night of Ashura. One when Abu Abdullah gathered everyone in a tent and he explained to them and said that they are thirsty for my blood, not yours. "Oh my friends, no one has received friends like I possess. I ask you that I will turn out this light, take one of my family members and escape from this place. Do not put yourself in danger." Abu Abdullah turned out the light, and each of these men would stand up. The old men would tie their waist so that they would stand tall. The young boys would stand on their toes to seem as if they were grown and mature. When Abu Abdullah turned on the light, he saw no one left. And they said, "Ya Ibn Rasulullah, should we be killed 1,000 times? Should our bodies be burned? We will ask Allah again to come back in your support. We will not leave you in this condition." After this moment, there is another moment on the night of Ashura when Abu Abdullah visits his sister. Outside of the tent is Nafi ibn Hilal, the security guard of Abu Abdullah on the night of Ashura. Nafi ibn Hilal narrates, he says, "As I stood outside of the tent, I heard the sister of Abu Abdullah ask, 'Have you tested these companions? Will they stay true to you on the day of Ashura? Will they not be overcome by these enemies?' Nafi says, I became so uncomfortable at my loyalty being questioned. I went to our leader Habib. I told him of this question. Habib came out, said, 'O lions of lovers of Ahlul Bayt.' All of the supporters came out. They grabbed their spears, stood in front of the tent of Sayyidah Zainab, and they say, 'O daughter of Rasulullah, if you wish to test us, we will take our lives here, but we will never leave Hussain ibn Ali.'" These were those men, when the morning of Ashura came, that the sons of the Banu Hashim stepped forward and said that we will sacrifice first for Abu Abdullah. And the companions called out and said, "O sons of Rasulullah, be patient, let us be the first to sacrifice." Each of them went out and fought for the cause of Imam Hussain in a way that had not been seen before. They described that Muslim ibn Awsaja, an old man fighting against another, when one came to put a spear in his chest, instead of backing off, they said, Muslim took the man having nothing in his hands, bit the nose of his enemy, but would not let go until the spear opened his back. But he would not leave the cause of Imam Hussain. When they came to the body of Muslim, Habib and Imam Hussain come. Muslim, Habib looks at him and he says, "Brother, I see you in difficulty. Do you have any wasiyah for me?" Muslim says, "Oh Habib, don't leave this one alone. The only wasiyah I give you is to sacrifice whatever you possess for Abu Abdullah." Such were the companions that they laid themselves in front of the Imam. There were those like Abis ibn Shabib. Abis was known as a brave man. When he presented himself to defend the Imam, he found the army of Umar Asad had encircled the Imam. Abis came forward to protect the Imam. Someone from the army of Umar Asad called out, "Abis is a brave lion. do not fight him. Stay away from him. I have seen kill many men. They said that they pushed away from Abis and circled around Imam Hussain. Abis wanted some way to distract them from Abu Abdullah. They said Abis took off his helmet and said, come and fight me. They said, we are still afraid of him. Abis took off the armor. He said, come and fight me and leave Hussein ibn Ali. Until eventually Abis took off his shirt and said, why don't you fight me? Leave the son of Zahra and come to me. They said, Abis has lost his mind. He said, Na'am, kad ajannani hubbil Hussein. That the love of Hussein ibn Ali has driven me crazy. Such were the companions they describe, and they say that this Abis, in some effort to protect Imam Hussein, ran into the army where they encircled him, but in fear of him, not one would fight him by sword. They stood around him in a circle and threw stones at him to kill him. But they would not go near him, yet Abis was satisfied to present this as his sacrifice. These companions of Abu Abdullah loved the Imam so much, but their masayib did not end in this way. That widow of Zuhair, after the day of Ashura, she sent a servant to the field of Karbala and she said, your master Zuhair has been killed with Imam Hussein. Go and put a kafan on him. That servant returns from the field and he says, I could not put a kafan on Zuhair. Why? Because the body of Abu Abdullah was uncovered under the sun. I could not imagine that Zuhair would be satisfied to be covered when Abu Abdullah has been left alone. They describe and say, when these shuhada, their heads were taken, that when they came to the city of Kufa, they wanted to disrespect Habib because he was the leader of the ashab. They hung his head from a horse. The rider of that horse says, when I entered Kufa, I would see a small boy who would come and look at this head. I asked him, what do you want? The boy ran away. Again, I noticed a young boy who would come and look at the head hanging from my horse. And as my horse would walk, it would kick this head and it would cause difficulty for this child. Again, he ran away when I questioned him. The third time I questioned him, I held him, I said, oh boy, why do you come and look at the head of Habib? He replies, I am Qasim ibn Habib. This is the head of my father hanging from your horse. I want you to return the head of my father so that I may bury it with some respect. I would imagine Habib would call out, oh my son Qasim, you are worried about my head, but the head of my master has been raised on a tall spear. They curse the head of my master. They throw stones at it. Oh Qasim, ask not about the head of Habib. Ask about the head of Abu Abdullah. Be from the supporters of Imam Hussain. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin and khususan Sayyid Nawab Haydar Naqawi and all of our marhumin who are present here tonight. Ya Allah, keep us on the upright path of Ahlul Bayt. We have gathered here with hajat. By the right of the tears in our eyes, fulfill our hajat. Those amongst our families, our communities that are suffering through sickness and disease, Ya Allah, by the mention of the Masa'ib of Abu Abdullah, fulfill the hajat of the mu'mineen, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahibul Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahibul Zaman. Entitle us to the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah in this world and the shafa' of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, li arwah al-mu'mineen.